This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
It's always nice when I get that extra day to relax over the weekend. Gives me a chance to actually unwind properly. And Lord knows my weekends are about to become a whole lot more hectic and busy. Especially now that summer's over. I have no idea how that's going to affect my schedule with how I pre-plan for all the Friday shows, but we'll see. Everything's been trial and error on this channel for the last 4 years. I've enjoyed the ride, but yeah, things are a lot different now than they were, say, even a year ago. A year ago, I still at least had the energy to watch 2 or 3 wrestling shows over the weekend despite working 3 jobs at the time. That's also when I was still relatively motivated by wrestling. I don't know, man. The older I get, the more things that I have to consume my time. Yeah, I've kind of hit that ceiling now where I don't even have the drive to catch up on the WWE clips on YouTube. I'm so out of the loop with things. I haven't even really been keeping tabs with wrestling podcasters. It used to be my Sunday tradition of getting up early, doing some laundry, grabbing a cup of coffee, and then sitting back and listening to some of Jim Cornette. Sometimes I'd even go for morning walks if the weather was good enough and listen to Jim then. You know how it goes, though. Once you get into that cycle of redoing the same thing over and over again, you start to lose interest after a while. And I'm somebody that can stick with a routine for months and months and never get bored. It's just the nature of where things are at with professional wrestling. Anytime the subject of Raw or SmackDown or even AEW is being brought up, I just find myself not caring. I have no interest. I know the big story that broke this past week was that controversy surrounding Raja Jackson at that Knox Pro event they ran. I read like 2 paragraphs of an article that came out from ESPN about it and immediately thought of the Dutch Mantel quote. And he's absolutely right. The business was a whole hell of a lot better when the marks were in the seats instead of in the wrestling ring. At the same time, though, isn't that all kind of indicative of how bleak things are with modern wrestling in 2025? The fact that one of the biggest news stories of the entire year is an incident that went down at a glorified indie event in front of like 300 people. Doesn't seem that long ago people were raving about the John Cena heel turn that wound up being a complete waste of time, effort, and money, as I knew it would be. But that all seems like a distant memory at this point. Nobody cares about that anymore. That's the news cycle for you. It's like politics. Everything is short-term attention span focused, deliberately. And nothing in the news really matters to the public at large after 24 hours. It's one topic to the next. It won't be long before people completely forget about the Minneapolis Catholic school shooting and then move on to the next big nationwide tragedy. But what can you do, right? I'm just an ordinary dude trying to live my life and coast through to the end. Luckily, we've got some wrestling to talk about that isn't tragic. Well, it's tragic in the sense of the subject being Monday Night Raw from 1996. Most of those shows are tragedies to watch. But you are tuning into the Five Starr Wrestling Report. Be sure to comment, subscribe, and give the show a like for me. We are the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everybody needs. Here on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays for classic coverage and all the usual fun stuff. I'm still planning on keeping this format for the time being, but we'll see how quickly the landscape of things change as we transition into the fall season. If anything, it'd be more likely that I cut something from the review series at some point. Especially if things get really crazy and hectic, which I know they will. But again, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For now, let's dive into this Raw episode and continue to trudge through the trenches of agony that was the WWF in 1996. So this is the Raw they taped and aired on Friday, September 6th, due to the holiday on Monday. Oh, by the way, happy Labor Day. It's crazy to think that WWF actually used to give their employees off for major holidays back in the day. I don't know, do we still call Labor Day a major holiday? Whatever. For me, it's a 3-day weekend. That's good enough. This was also a taped special in that they reference this show as Championship Friday, which they set up 2 weeks ago when Goldust won that return battle royal and qualified to face Shawn for the WWF title. You know, the one that was originally supposed to be reserved for Ahmed until his kidneys decided to explode. And I don't want to get lost in the weeds from the jump here, but I had to mention this because this was just mind-boggling when I heard it. I'm paraphrasing here, but when they were plugging the Shawn Goldust match in the cold open hype package, I'm pretty sure this is exactly what I heard after they got done doing the whole schlong sucking thing with HBK. When you think of champions, Goldust is the antithesis to that. I'm sorry, what? The antithesis to being a champion? As in, he is the antithesis of what a champion looks like? Boy, is that an outright fucking burial, right? Who the hell co-signed that script? Could you try any harder to let everybody know how little you think of Goldust at this point? By the way, spoiler for the main event. Goldust did not win the title from Shawn. Big shock, I know. Even though that was the only real thing of substance on this particular episode, we did have some other crap to sift through. We at least don't know as of this point that Hunter's still in the doghouse. They're just really milking that curtain call punishment. He got the jobber treatment this week after being served up to sit in about 3 minutes. But see, the funny thing is, they are still actually giving Hunter storylines. They're just storylines that aren't really being featured on the flagship show and nobody honestly cares about. Plus, it all involves shit with Kurt Hennig, which, as we know, Kurt never got cleared to get back in the ring to wrestle ever again. So none of this ever goes anywhere. Literally, the story with him and Hunter right now is that he keeps going around stealing Hunter's eye candy every week. It's always a different girl, but the best part is that he's literally just going out there and kidnapping these random women every week. And we never see or hear from them ever again. So how exactly is Mr. Perfect not being questioned by law enforcement? Where do these women go when they leave with him? Does he just escort them out of the building? Is he taking them to a secret room to give them a little pump and dump action? Perhaps the boiler room, for all we know. Yeah, this is an incredibly stupid story. So after Sid pummeled and killed Hunter with a jackknife powerbomb, you'll never guess what happened. Kurt Hennig came down and stole Hunter's girl again. You know, in like 98% of other circumstances, I would probably sit here and sympathize with a guy getting intentionally jobbed out as penance, especially when it's out of spite. But because of the fact that it's Hunter, and I can't stand the fucking guy, I got a kick out of this. He showed up, got his ass beaten under 5 minutes, and then had his girl stolen by the end. The only thing left to do at that point is piss in his mouth while he's down. We got an Ahmed Johnson update. He's recovering. Well, recovering from the kidney injury. His speech impediment is still a thing. But he is expected to make a full recovery. Yeah, I know, you're not stoked about it either. From there, we got Steve Austin versus Marc Mero in the next round of this Intercontinental title tournament they're doing. I did like how the graphics read, Stone Cold versus Wild Man. Very WWF-like. They did mention on commentary, the last 2 times these guys faced off, it was back at the King of the Ring pay-per-view, when Mero ended up busting open Austin's lip. And I think he had to get like 12 stitches. So I can only imagine what was going through Austin's mind having to wrestle Mero again here. Probably thinking, you know, if I can just get through this thing without Mero opening me up hard way or potatoing me in some way, I'll be happy. We also had Brian Pillman on commentary. And he actually had some news to break here. They've already started the rumblings with the Bret Austin feud, where Austin's going around claiming to be the best. And since Pillman and Bret go way back to their days working in Canada together, he's had the chance to talk with him and get an idea of when he might be coming back to the WWF. And while he didn't mention too much detail here, he said that he has a big surprise in store for In Your House on the 22nd. One might assume he was talking about the return of Bret Hart, but he's also a heel. He could be joshing. Anyway, so Mero and Austin are having their match. It's fine, I guess. People don't really give a shit about Mero, and they're still pretty lukewarm when it comes to Austin by this stage in the game. A few mild cheers here and there, but it's very sparse. So they're kind of just going through a series of spots for a while until Mero gets shit canned to the floor. Then right as he tries to get back on the apron, you see Austin shove the ref into Mero to force a disqualification. And they also had a post-match brawl, which looked more like two 9-year-olds on the playground getting into a shoving match. It was quite tame. I did like the idea that Austin was so ambivalent about winning the IC title. He was perfectly fine with eliminating himself from the tournament. He did not give a fuck. He's probably thinking long game, brother. Screw the IC title. I don't need that strap. Have you seen the two previous champions? That belt means nothing anymore. Hey, I'm not going to argue with him. Worked out well for him in the end, right? So then we had this King's Court segment with Mark Henry. And again, I had to set the stage here to give you an idea of how long this feud has been in the works. It is now September. Mark Henry's debut segment was on an episode of Monday Night Raw where he press slammed Jerry Lawler in a dark segment that aired later on. Oh, and that particular angle I'm referring to, that happened back in March. Before WrestleMania. We are now going on 6 months of this feud being put on the back burner. And they are now just getting around to revisiting it. And yes, I know Mark Henry was competing in the Olympics that summer. He was also being trained from scratch with zero wrestling background. He wasn't exactly somebody that was going to be working television matches anytime during his first several months. I get all that. But it's amazing when you think about how long ago they shot that initial angle with him and Lawler. And now we finally reached the point where they're ready to open that can of worms again. Half a year later. So here comes Mark to confront the King. And immediately Lawler's going to town with the witty remarks and spiteful comments, cracking jokes about how the one commonality between Jake Roberts and the 1996 Olympics is that they both got bombed. He no. I'm not going to read every single bullet point here. Let me just say this. Yes, Mark Henry was very green. Truthfully, there was a lot of validity behind the comment, Marc didn't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch. Yeah, Lawler meant that sardonically, but he also wasn't entirely wrong. But I'll tell you something, man. Mark Henry was legit. That guy was fucking as real as it gets. Instinctually, it's tough because you've heard people over the years talk about how Mark didn't really get the business. I would actually dispute that. In the ring, yeah, Mark had a tough time. He wasn't athletically gifted. But when it comes to being smart and understanding how the wrestling business worked, when it came to promos, Mark Henry was pretty good from the beginning. It did not really take him long to figure out the promo. And when Lawler challenged him to a wrestling match and Mark Henry standing there telling him, "You want to fight? Bring it on. Ain't nothing standing between us but air and opportunity." I mean, you could feel that. Yeah, Henry was probably reciting some memorized material there, but you can tell he meant the delivery. Remember, though, the idea they're trying to establish here is that Mark hasn't been training long enough to be accepting challenges. You know, he's still trying to learn to hit the ropes and do basics. But now you got Lawler out there goading him to get in the ring to have a match when he's clearly not ready. And then at the very end, after Lawler calls him yellow and a coward, when he grabs Lawler by the collar and tells him, "If you want to wrestle, it's on. And when I get through with you, you're going to get one gold medal butt kicking." And I'll be honest, a little bit of pee ran down the side of my leg there. I was quite concerned for Mr. Lawler on this particular evening. What can I say though, man? It was great stuff. And it wasn't a rocket science wrestling promo, but they really made the people want to see Mark Henry rip Lawler in half. And I can't say the same was ever true when it came to the stuff with him and Jake Roberts, dude. That was just a death feud from the very beginning. This was the kind of stuff that made Lawler great as a heel in the territories. Just him being a pompous, self-centered, loudmouth prick. And yeah, you throw in the occasional witty cheap heat comments to send people over the edge. But without the watered-down WWF theatrics. This is what I wanted out of Lawler full-time in the WWF. Not feuding with Doink and a bunch of midgets. Not berating Bret Hart's mom and dad every week. Not him making stupid alcohol jokes and just being annoying and nauseating to listen to. This shit worked. And it worked because you could believe it. You could believe Mark Henry meant every word he said here. And hey, imagine that. Now all of a sudden I'm actually interested to see this match on pay-per-view. Do I remember anything about it? Not really, no. I remember Mark won. That's about it. But I'm intrigued to watch it again and see if it was actually good from what I remember. We're talking well over 20 years since I've actually seen the match. maybe it'll actually hold up by today's standards. So then we had a Mankind squash with a guy that kind of looked like a distant relative of Charlie Haas. I have no idea who he was or if the announcers ever mentioned his name. But that's not really the important thing here. What's important is the bombshell that JR dropped minutes into the match. He has it on good authority that Razor Ramon and Big Daddy Cole Diesel will be making their returns to the WWF in the coming future. Ugh. So yeah, that's a thing we have to talk about in the coming months. Fake Razor and fake Diesel. Yippee-ki-yay. There's a pair of gimmicks that the fans never let the company live down. Nearly killed off poor Glenn Jacobs' career. And that's after we saw him do the run as Isaac fucking Yankem. So that was the bad news. The good news, however, is that we got a Kurt Angle plug here in 1996. And this is actually interesting because offhand, I don't know how many people actually remember the whole Kurt Angle story when he was first looking to make the transition from amateur to pro wrestling in the late 90s. Remember, he actually made an appearance at an ECW pay-per-view sometime in 96. I can never remember what the show was called. It was the pay-per-view where Raven crucified the Sandman on the cross with the barbed wire. Pretty well-known ECW moment. But it stirred up a lot of controversy because Kurt absolutely hated that angle. No pun intended. I think the story was that he left the building immediately after they shot that. And at the same time, the WWF had been in negotiations to try to sign Kurt to a deal before he ended up taking the offer in 98. And I don't recall the details, but they ended up rescinding the initial offer in 96. And I think a lot of that had to do with Kurt not liking the concept of pre-planned and predetermined outcomes for wrestling matches. I mean, he basically thought pro wrestling was beneath amateur wrestling and wasn't in the same class. Keep in mind, this is all pre-Attitude Era, before Kurt kind of started to see the bigger picture with how you can actually draw money in the business. But yeah, that was cool. Because I almost forgot about Kurt having those initial conversations with the WWF in late 96. As do a lot of people, I think. So, well, we had the main event with Shawn and Goldust. But I did have to briefly mention this. This is legit, by the way. I'm not making this quote up. Sid Vicious gets into a tug-of-war contest with Angus the Elephant. And while he lost the first round, he did manage to score a win in the rematch. With some help, of course. For anybody asking what the hell I'm talking about, it was for an event they called The Experience in Toronto. Whatever the hell that could possibly refer to. It was kind of a cross between a live event and a meet and greet session. But with elephants. And I gotta say, if there's one man I could believe having a reasonable battle with an elephant, Psycho Sid is that dude. Because only Sid would be mad enough to try to have a legit tug-of-war contest with a fucking elephant. In any case, Shawn versus Goldust. No, wait, I lied. Before we talk about Shawn and Goldust, I have to sidebar for a second, bring this up. Why this is a thing that happened, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know where it's all going, but it doesn't mean it made a lick of sense. So Bob Backlund's in the ring because, yes, we're still talking about Bob Backlund in 1996. And he basically took about 17 hours to set up the return of the Iron Sheik. Completely at random. He said that Sheik is somebody he has a tremendous amount of respect for, someone that he knows very well and will be assisting him in co-managing a new talent. A new talent that did not actually appear here, but again, we'll talk about that more in a sec. So here comes Sheik, and he gets in the ring, and he proceeds to cut a promo, and he talks, and he talks, and he talks, and he talks, kind of looking at the timeline, wondering, is he just going to run out the clock for the remainder of the show? Backlund and Sheik are just babbling on and on for minutes, to the point where Kevin Kelly legitimately had to cut them off mid-sentence to go to commercial. It was the old yank him out by the cane routine. Pull the plug. And of course, if you have no idea what this is setting up, the whole segment seemed like it was designed to send people away in droves. The thought of having to watch Bob Backlund and the Iron Sheik co-manage a new guy, I mean, that just makes me want to open up a Jim Beam with Jake Roberts. Down the whole goddamn bottle. As far as the new talent goes they're talking about, it's the Sultan, or Rikishi, if you weren't keeping track of his 750 repackages throughout the mid to late 90s. Yeah, it took him about 7 or 8 months, but they finally dropped the Street Preacher gimmick, or whatever the hell Fatu's previous character was supposed to be. I still don't know. After all these years, pretty soon we'll be seeing him show up with a completely different look and presentation. Again. So get ready for that. More importantly, get ready to watch Bob Backlund and the Iron Sheik on your television monitors for the next however many months. They're just begging for people to tune into Nitro at this point. Daring people. The thing is, too, I vaguely remember Bob Backlund managing the Sultan for a period of time. I do not remember the Iron Sheik being around. So hopefully this will be like his WCW run from '89, where they'll instantly regret bringing him in and then pay him to sit at home and do nothing for a full calendar year. Okay, I'm serious now. We can finally talk about Shawn Michaels and Goldust for the WWF title. Now that I've filtered through all the other meaningless void filler. For a Championship Friday episode, there was quite a bit of meaningless filler. So I think the big question here is, should I go ahead and berate Shawn for the Playgirl magazine posing? Or is that just beating a dead horse since everybody's already poked fun at Shawn for that story? liked how even JR hinted at Shawn getting heat from the boys over that. Like, come on. How do they actually think that was going to get Shawn good publicity? As if they already weren't making it easy enough for people to hate on Shawn and call him a pussy at every turn. Now you're just flagrantly giving people the ammo to give him a hard time. Playgirl magazine. Ridiculous. So this match, you know, it wasn't bad, albeit they really didn't have a whole lot of time to work with. The biggest problem was that it was broken up with 2 commercial spots, one of which was horribly placed, right when they were both trading near falls and the crowd was actually at its peak. A lot of it was Shawn selling and working underneath. There was a split screen at one point where they showed Mankind looking through a door and basically threatening to kill Shawn. You know, the kind of thing you'd expect Mankind to do. And so they're going back and forth at the end. Like I said, we got the terrible commercial break right as Shawn had an ear fall on Goldust. And they come back with Goldust trying to give Shawn the curtain call DDT. But then Shawn reversed it and gave Goldust the moonsault out of the corner to get the 3 count. And that basically led to Mankind immediately coming down through the crowd to try to jump Shawn, which basically amounted to nothing. The most anticlimactic beatdown attempt ever. Mankind slides into the ring. He and Goldust start walking towards Shawn to try to attack him. Then Shawn just bails to the floor and backs up the ramp. Like, no, fuck you. Not having any part of that. I mean, to be fair, they were a little pressed for time at the end there. But still, you couldn't at least have Mankind put Shawn in the mandible claw while JR's having a conniption on commentary? Seems like they could have done a little more than this. But that was basically their close to the Championship Friday episode. How would you describe an episode like this? Lame? That's what I'd call it. Granted, I wasn't expecting them to hotshot a bunch of title matches or anything. But for a pre-recorded Raw set to air on a Friday night in prime time, especially when they're unopposed to Nitro, I mean, you would have at least expected something mildly less comatose than your average Monday Night Raw. I mean, the Mark Henry, Jerry Lawler thing was the best part of the show. And that was just a simple little 5-minute TV segment buried in the middle of the program. But it did a hell of a lot more to get me excited for In Your House than anything they did to build up Mankind versus Shawn. And while I know that match is renowned for being a classic, one of the better Shawn title matches during his entire run as champion, believe it or not. I'm not pooning the match. I'm just pooning the way they decided to promote it on TV. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up on that note now because my upstairs neighbors are fucking jumping on the bed. So, yeah. I'm going to end it there. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you come back on whatever day it is. Friday. Yeah, Friday. We'll have some classic coverage to go over. Since I will have an extra day tomorrow, I might spread out the recording sessions a little bit. Try to give myself a break throughout the week. We'll see, though. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching, and take care. Peace out.